Julie. Julie, look. Look. Look at me. Look at it. Say hi. Okay. Brittany Glass. Look at Cookbook. What's what? Nikki, I don't know. She's probably in class. Linda. Where's your sister? Get out of the camera. Okay. Look at this guy. Look at this guy. Joke.
You got up really early.
Totally.
Is it Friday?
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me. We're here on behalf of the Obama campaign. We're doing a big push and a big drive to get people to go vote early. It's one of the rare things you can do in Florida. We're hoping that people do that. I know it's a little unlikely that I would be the guy to come and tell you to vote or to vote early. I've never done anything like this before, so I'll just give you that as a disclaimer. I'm a registered independent, so I've voted for both Democrats and Republicans and some third-party candidates, depending on the type of election. And the reason I got involved in the Obama campaign goes back about 4 years ago, when I was living down in Texas, outside of Houston, and a buddy of mine wanted to go to college. He graduated from high school about 2 years before this. He was 19, about to turn 20. And he couldn't afford college, so he was working a minimum wage job at a trucking company. And he was saving up, and his phone rang one day, and somebody from a company called Halliburton was on the other line. Do you guys know Halliburton? Yeah.
No.
Right. So Halliburton's Dick Cheney's old company. They're involved in Iraq War reconstruction. They called my friend and said they'd offer him $90,000 if he agreed to go to Iraq for that truck, for the private sector. Okay. But we talked about exactly what that would mean. That it wasn't a military service job. This was a private contracting firm. And, you know, 90 grand at a public school especially would have paid for his undergrad education, would have paid for grad school. He probably would have let him put a down payment on a small apartment. But the trade-off was that he wasn't sure if he'd come back, especially because this wasn't military service, this was private contracting. So the more we talked about it, the more we just came to the conclusion that no matter what he decided to do, this was a really sad thing, that the world's richest, most powerful country could only offer a buddy of ours two options if he wanted to go to college, either minimum wage or $90,000 in the middle of a war zone. And that didn't seem like it had much to do with whether we were Democrats or Republicans. It just had to do with the fact that somebody was ignoring our generation, and they were ignoring the fact that we all should have the chance to go to college. We should all have the chance to have, you know, access to education or health care. And so the cynical side of me that had been a registered independent, along with my friends, we kind of got more cynical for the next few weeks. And then thankfully, we were watching the Democratic National Convention about 4 weeks later. This was back in '04. And half my friends are pretty conservative, the other half are pretty progressive. But when the keynote address started, we noticed this skinny guy with big ears walking on stage and making this incredible, very eloquent speech. But this one line in particular where he talked about how there shouldn't be blue states or red states, we should focus on being the United States, was kind of interesting to us because, especially after September 11th, it seemed like Democrats and Republicans who were politicians were so intent on dividing folks instead of, you know, bringing the country together. And that was a little strange to us. So when we saw that speech, we got a little inspired and we thought, who is this guy? He gives great speeches. That's not a reason to necessarily support him, but what are his platforms? And we were pretty impressed with a few things. That Barack started his public service career as a community organizer on the south side of Chicago. He worked with folks who were laid off by Maytag. This was kind of significant to us because in the last 4, at that point, and then 8 years under the Bush-McCain tax policies, a lot of companies were rewarded with tax breaks for shipping American jobs overseas. So the fact that we could have a president who had actually worked with folks who were laid off by companies like this would be huge in terms of bringing jobs back, making sure that working families were supported, making sure that 95% of Americans got tax cuts. And the second thing that was impressive was that Barack went to a great law school. He went to Harvard Law. If any of you are poli-sci majors looking at law school, you know that if you're a corporate lawyer, you can make, you know, $200,000–300,000 a year to start out with. Senator Obama turned down those jobs and became a civil rights lawyer. So because of that, he only paid off his student loans about 2 years ago. He wasn't making a whole lot as a civil rights lawyer. Anyone know why he paid off his loans?
Why?
Because of his book deal. So it had nothing to do with any amount of money that he made off of public service work. So things like that were impressive to us because we realized that he understood what it was like for working families. He understood what it was like for folks who were trying to afford a college education. A lot of us joined the volunteer efforts, and we noticed a couple of things when we volunteered. Now, and again, a lot of this has very little to do with political party affiliation, but a bunch of us started volunteering about a year ago when the primary season kicked off. And I noticed the TV's on over there, so this is a pretty good segue. On CNN or MSNBC or Fox News, you hear stories that talked about how older folks traditionally vote all the time. And the average age of voting, I think in the Iowa caucus in 2004, was 65 years of age. And the media loved going crazy with this because they're like, college students said they'd vote in 2004, and in 2004 not enough of them came out for either political party to make a difference. There's no indication that they'll come out again. Well, when we went to a lot of Barack's organizational meetings and to see who the volunteers were, predominantly it was folks who were under 25 years of age. A lot of us came from families that had voted staunchly Democrat or staunchly Republican, but a lot of people were crossing the party line. A lot of us had never voted before. And it really flew in the face of these people who said that only 65-year-olds were going to come out and vote. And a second news story that they ran around the same time was about the new media, so MySpace and Facebook and YouTube. And they made no connection to the election, which I thought was really interesting because all these websites, they talked about how 18 to 30-year-olds were using these websites. How many of you have seen a video on YouTube in the last, 3 days? All right. Same here. So, because of how many of us use YouTube, regardless of political affiliation, obviously, YouTube makes about $7.5 million a month on advertising revenue. MySpace and Facebook. MySpace was started not too long ago, and it sold to
Mario Kart, yeah, with
That
the
is
little
so
guy.
fun.
Where I would play.